Some legends are told, some turn to dust or to gold, but you will remember me for centuries.
This is the Cameron Parker Show, brought to you by Spreaker, where we discuss everything from around the local professional sports scene in Colorado, such as the Denver Broncos.
Chris Harris comes out. I don't know if he was on the drive, but he said I knew 15 seconds into that game that I should have been on T.Y. Hilton. If players are coming out and saying that, it falls again on the coaching staff.
Not to mention insiders from around your local sports scene. Ryan Spilborgs, former outfielder for your Colorado Rockies.
It's not going to be the 25 guys that leave spring training that are going to be the only guys the entire season. You need depth. You need guys that are going to be in your minor leagues that you may not expect.
Ryan Edwards.
You know, when you're talking about an offensive line, it's about the five best guys, right? And you're talking about the five best guys gelling. There hasn't been a lot of time for that.
It's showtime. Are you ready? Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen. It is another edition of the Cameron Parker Show. It is October 17th. We are inching closer to Halloween. And speaking of scary, I am here to be talking about, a scary victory for your Denver Broncos, and it came at the hands of the New York Giants. It was a scary game, and it was one that, it certainly did not go the way that Broncos fans wanted, and certainly the way that the Denver Broncos wanted themselves. So we're going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking about much to the Denver Broncos' chagrin, as we're going to be discussing everything that happened in that game. Some of the things that were disappointing, maybe a few bright spots, maybe, but it's really, really hard to find any bright spots after an extremely disappointing performance by the Denver Broncos. Another thing on the docket here today is I will try my very darndest to get a friend of mine on. We will be talking fantasy football. He will try and call into the show, and we'll be talking for about a segment, trying to discuss who are some waiver wire pickups, who are some stardoms, who are some sit-ems, to get your lineups ready for that Thursday night matchup. Now, clearly, I understand, the frustrations about Broncos country, because especially after the game, it was incredibly worrisome that they deviated from the plan. And for those of you who have not had the opportunity to check out my predominantly orange article that came out, I believe it was the day of the game. It was about an hour or 2 hours before the game got kicked off. The article entailed, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And look, I get the scenario as far as the Broncos were concerned, that they had to upgrade their lineup. They had to upgrade the lineup from the standpoint they needed to get Demaryius Thomas involved. They needed to get Emmanuel Sanders involved. They needed to obviously sprinkle in more carries for Jamal Charles and so on and so forth. The offense needed to be a little bit more explosive than it certainly has been. So certainly, if you look at it, the Denver Broncos, when you look in what all is said and done, they broke it during the game against the New York Giants, and it was not fixed. So I will be discussing much of the Denver Broncos and exactly what happened and why did it break, and, what can they do to fix it? It's pretty simple. But we're going to discuss that next here on the Cameron Parker Show as we await the friend to see if we can talk about some fantasy football here on the Cameron Parker Show.
Up from the
ashes I will rise. Your light is breaking through the night. I'm breathing in the air of life. Not giving in, this is my fight. Come break me down, every part of me. Nothing can stop me now. Awaken, holy fire, breathe life into my soul. 'Cause we're ready for revival. Come awaken, come awaken, love. Come awaken, come awaken, love. Come awaken, come awaken. Nothing can ever match your power. Shout out for victory. It's ours. Oh, break me down, every part of me. Nothing can stop me now. Awaken, holy fire, breathe life into my soul. 'Cause we're ready for revival. Come awaken, come awaken, love. Come awaken, come awaken, love. Come awaken, come awaken. Awaken, holy fire, breathe life into my soul. 'Cause we're ready for revival. Come awaken, come awaken. Awaken, holy fire, breathe life into my soul. 'Cause we're ready for revival. Come awaken, come awaken, love. Come awaken, come awaken, love. Come awaken, come awaken, love.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Cameron Parker Show. If you feel free to follow the show handle, it is at CP_show. You can also follow my other Twitter handle at Cameron Parker PO. And if you feel like chiming in on the text line, chatting in on the Cameron Parker Show, please feel free to create a Spreaker account, find the Cameron Parker Show, and chat away all, and we will get your comments on the air. This is about a little bit, about 10, maybe 15 minutes past the hour, around 7 o'clock Mountain Time. If you are tuning in all across the nation, thank you guys very much for making the Cameron Parker Show a part of your guys' evening. And if you are Denver Broncos fans, thank you very much for listening to this as well, as we are going to be discussing the disappointment. And that disappointment is that the Denver Broncos suffered a loss to now the first win New York Giants. I want to get some of your guys' takes here as far as the game is concerned. It was disappointing, and I teased it before the break. And one of the things that was just in so much disarray was that a game plan, and that a game plan that felt so unneeded in a game that, well, really, they had to have. Certainly when you look at what happened in the previous weekend, you look at Kansas City lost. Oakland lost as well. So there was a prime opportunity for the Denver Broncos to capitalize, and they did not. And so what did they do? They did the one thing I told them not to do. If you guys ended up reading my article, I ended it by saying that if the Denver Broncos decided to deviate from their script, break it up, and move to a different game plan, such as not running the ball heavy, not running the ball heavy, then they will be in a dogfight. Any sort of deviating from a game plan is feeding into let's just say it, another trap game for the Denver Broncos. And they cannot allow that to happen. And that's bad coaching. And unfortunately, now this bad loss does, in fact, go on Vance Joseph's record. Not just this season, but just his overall record entirely. And it's disappointing, it's frustrating, and it's certainly one that he has to have back. And he has to get it right, because you look at the upcoming games. We mentioned it in my poll question, and there's certainly a lot of feedback going on as to some of the people that voted in. And we're going to pull up some of the people that commented in, or not commented in, but voted on the Cameron Parker poll question of the day. And the question was, what is your worry scale for the Denver Broncos after the loss to the New York Giants? 1 to 4. Because, I can only fit 4 on the poll question, 4 being the highest. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. So for 1%, 11% feel that, they're not all that worried. For 2, there are 22% of the people who voted. And for 3%, 19% say that they're worried, but not overly worried, and you may want to hit the panic button. Number 4 is the highest, and number 4 is the highest amount of worry, and maybe let's just hit the panic button per se. And number 4 is 48%. So 48% of the people out there, of the 27 people who voted on this Cameron Parker Show vote poll, said that they are incredibly worried for this team right now. And you look at it, they face the Chargers on the road, they face the Chiefs for the first time, and they face the Philadelphia Eagles, who are no slouches anymore. So they are entering now a tough stretch of games after the loss to the New York Giants. And it's because of this play now. It's because of this play of Trevor Siemian, the play of the offense, that people are starting to wonder if in fact this team is not just Super Bowl worthy, but if in fact this team is playoff worthy. And it's really incredible when you think about it, to do a little bit of a kind of a analogy, if you will. What I described in the article against, sorry about it, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, was this notion that that the Giants were once considered a playoff team. They were considered a playoff team, and at some were considered a Super Bowl contending team. Now 0-5. The New York Giants played so well of a team that they not only affected the Denver Broncos' mental toughness and the actual mental fortitude of them as a team, but they also affected potentially their playoff chances. and their playoff confidence. And that should not be taken lightly. The defense is playoff ready, but again, the offense is not showing up. It's the same script from 2016. And right now, the offense is wasting the opportunity for this defense. Trevor Siemian has regressed mightily. He was incredibly sharp the first 2 games, and in the last 3 games, his habits started coming back. The pocket presence was incredibly horrible. Moving up into a defensive lineman or not escaping and hitting a hole on his pocket presence like he really should. And going through his first read, Janoris Jenkins said it himself. There is that point where you have to not just look at your first read the entire time. You have to go through your first, your second, your third read. This is not about throwing the football. Trevor Siemian can sling it with the best of them. Okay? This is about his decision-making. His decision-making and pocket presence have been dreadful, to say the least. It's been dreadful to see him go from his first read and first read only. It's one of the reasons why the Giants did exceptionally well, because, when you're just pinpointing it on, your best wide receiver at that point, then, you're going to be stuck in a very tough situation of forcing the ball every single time to your number one receiver, a.k.a. Demaryius Thomas. And in large part, that still goes to Trevor Siemian. And the reason why I say that is because, for one, he was also throwing it into places that was getting players injured. It was not a dirty play. It was not a dirty call, or not even a dirty no call. It was a great tackle, certainly by Landon Collins. But as far as where the ball placement was, and where Trevor Siemian threw it with Emmanuel Sanders, that is going to put players in a very bad situation to get injured. And that is why you saw Emmanuel Sanders sprain his ankle. He's out for a few weeks. You saw Isaiah McKenzie go up for a ball in between 3 defenders, come down and sprain his ankle. He's out a few weeks. Demaryius Thomas, he's got a bruise on his leg. And he's now played through a lot of tough injuries. So I would imagine he's going to be fighting through this one as well. The fact of the matter is that Trevor Siemian, and this was my worry coming into this game, because he has regressed so much, my worry is that Trevor Siemian was one of the reasons why the Giants may potentially win this game, is because he has to be on point. And he wasn't. He was continuing to have his habits come back. He re-injured the same shoulder. And I said it before, even if it's just a minor injury, ladies and gentlemen, he is so ineffective with his non-throwing shoulder that incredibly worries me. And I realize that, I certainly realize that the aspect is there for Siemian to be better. We're going to take a little bit of a beat on that right now. We are going to take it to CJ Cranock, a good friend of mine, and we're going to talk some fantasy football here. CJ, how you doing?
Hey, good. How about you, man?
Doing good. The show is going on right now.
Sweet.
And we are talking, obviously, some fantasy football. Now that we have you on, so we're taking a little bit of a beat on the Denver Broncos discussion, and the disappointing Broncos discussion, I should say.
Yeah, you could say that. Right.
But tell us a little bit about what it is that you're trying to accomplish with this fantasy football website. I kind of teased a little bit about it, But tell them a little bit about this fantasy football site. Where are you looking to go with this? And maybe see if you want to go a little bit further with it.
Okay, yeah, for sure. So I'm going to be running a site. It's called fantasyfootballgurus.com, and that's going to be live a little bit later this week. So I'm in the process of building all that. Kind of a long story short, I'm in a class. I go to BYU, Idaho, and I needed to create a business for this semester. And I decided that a fantasy football blog is something I felt knowledgeable about, something that I could give some good advice on. Had success playing fantasy football in the past and won quite a bit of money, and have some friends that asked me for advice. I run a couple leagues. I was like, hey, I think this would be a really great idea. So fantasyfootballgurus.com. That'll be live here in the next couple days. And I'm really excited. I'm really excited to be a part of the show too.
Absolutely, and you've been on the Cameron Parker Show before, and you and your annoying best friend Brooks were on the show. So you kind of understand the feel of it as far as the Cameron Parker Show. It's certainly great having you both of you guys on that one day. And when you asked me the opportunity to be a part of the show again and have you be a part of the show again, I certainly wasn't going to pass it up.
Yeah, man. Thanks so much for having me. I think this is going to be awesome.
Absolutely. Well, let's get right into it. Obviously, so you're talking about advice. So, me, myself included, I'm in that fantasy league, certainly of many of them that you have. And if there was one advice, certainly, that I probably should have asked is what I probably should have gone for a different quarterback. Because, well, for those people that don't know, one of the fantasy leagues that I'm in that I have with CJ, Carson Palmer is my quarterback. And then Ryan Tannehill ended up getting injured in the offseason, and he ended up having season-ending surgery. So that kind of took me out of a lot of options. But what are some of this is maybe a transition to some advice, but what could be some advice for someone that is looking for a Thursday night pickup, and who potentially might be some of those players?
All right, so that's one thing I'm going to focus on is some waiver wire ads. So I'll hopefully be able to talk about those when I come on Tuesdays. Tuesday is the first day of waiver wires, the only day of waiver wires for normal leagues. And so hopefully I can give you guys some good advice on who to pick up. And so my number one is obviously we had a really big injury this last Sunday, a couple of them, but the biggest one being Aaron Rodgers. So a lot of people out there own Aaron Rodgers, wondering what in the world they're going to do. It was just announced that he is going to have surgery. He's probably going to miss the rest of the year. So who do you fill in for him? And so I'm going to go with the most obvious answer here, but I think it's something that people aren't really talking about, and that's Brett Hundley. And Brett Hundley is, you look at Mike McCarthy and the things that he's done with quarterbacks, and he's known for putting backups in the game and those backups having success. And if you've watched Brett Hundley throughout the preseason or throughout his 3 years in Green Bay, you know that this dude's legit, and he's good with his legs. And in fantasy football, those rushing yards are worth more than passing yards. Well, and so I know that his line is terrible.
Yeah.
I know that he's going to be scrambling around the pocket trying to make plays. But I see them throwing the ball a lot because of the lack of ground game for them. And Brett Hundley, I'm telling you right now, he's legit. Okay, and I don't know if he's going to crack. He's not going to crack my top 10. He's not even going to crack my top 15. But if you're scrambling because you need to add somebody on the waiver wire for Aaron Rodgers this week, or you just need a new quarterback in general, I think he's definitely worth taking a shot. He's going to throw the ball a lot. I
was going to say, so let me ask you this then, because you said Brett Hundley. Why not a Mitchell Trubisky or a Case Keenum right now, for that matter?
Yeah. So Case Keenum, I really think that here in a couple weeks, hopefully for Vikings fans, that Teddy Bridgewater is going to be back. And, he just got cleared to start practicing again. It's going to be a few weeks before he gets going. And, if you want maybe a short-term filler, I think that you could go with a Case Keenum. You could go with Mitchell Trubisky. mostly because I think Hundley's offensive line is going to be pretty rough these next couple weeks. So I'm talking more of a rest of season filler here when you talk about Brett Hundley. But I think, hopefully Vikings fans, Teddy Bridgewater will be back for you. That's hard for me to say because I'm a Packer fan. But he's your best bet at winning if he's healthy. And, so Mitchell Trubisky, I don't know if you want to deal with the rookie ups and downs. Brett Hundley's not a rookie. He's been in the system for 3 years. He has a proven coach that's good with quarterbacks, that has a good system. So I think I would rank Hundley above those guys.
Well, let's keep the Packer trend, because there is another dilemma that the Packers have to deal with right now. They face, obviously, the Minnesota Vikings. They are a tremendous defense. But Aaron Jones did something that really no Green Bay running back had ever done in his first career start, at least for a while, and that was rush for 100 yards. And obviously he went and didn't have the best performance, but now it appears that Ty Montgomery is healthy. And so Aaron Jones is a guy that probably alerted a lot of fantasy owners for a potential pickup. How exactly would you maybe work the workload, not to use two words, but work the workload necessarily of a guy like an Aaron Jones and Ty Montgomery? And who would be the guy in your opinion?
For fantasy purposes, in normal 10-team leagues with two running backs, I wouldn't want either guy right now. And that's because, one, like we were talking about before, the Packers' offensive line is just as hurt as their quarterback, and that's not going to be good for their running game. And I think they're going to be playing from behind a lot because the defense seemed a little out of it too when Aaron Rodgers got hurt. You want to talk about the impact of losing your star quarterback. I think it affects more than just the offense. The life of the defense, they just weren't even there. So I think we're going to be looking at the Packers playing behind a lot, and with a running back by committee is kind of what I would expect with Ty Montgomery and Jones. So I would be avoiding them unless you're in the deepest of leagues or dynasty leagues. In dynasty leagues, I think that you're going to be looking at the Packers are going to be using him for the next 5-10 years. I think that he's going to be a 1-2 year back. He's going to split carries with Montgomery, and then hopefully they'll try to go a different direction. The Packers have never had, a really good franchise quarterback in a really long time. Or
franchise running back, yeah.
Yeah, for a really long time. I don't see that. I don't think he's that. I think he can get the job done, but so can Ty Montgomery. You look at Ty Montgomery being a converted wide receiver, so if you play in a PPR league, maybe you go his direction, knowing he might get a couple check down passes, get you a couple points. So PPR might look at Ty Montgomery as like a flex play, but Aaron Jones probably off the fantasy radar for the moment unless he takes a really big timeshare in the backfield.
Okay, well let's move into the actual stardom and sit-ems matchups for fantasy football. This is something we will also be delving into because, well, that's what we have to do as far as setting our lineup for the Thursday night game. Which, maybe I should just say, are you a fan personally of the Thursday night game?
Oh, from a fantasy perspective, I kind of like it because it gets you into the game a little bit. It makes the week a little bit more exciting, the work week a little bit more exciting. But I don't think it's good for football. I think waiver wire ads are way harder when you have to worry about trying to add people before Thursday because, let's face it, we have jobs and we don't have a lot of time to be doing this. So, I say my overall opinion would be no, I'm not a fan of the Thursday night football game. I don't know if that's going to go away anytime soon, though.
Right. It literally takes cramming to a whole other level especially during a week when the week is getting ready to be finished. And that's usually when the job week's getting ready to be finished, and so we have to find time to find the best alternative for our lineup, and it ends up being a Thursday, right near the end of the week. So who are your initial stardom and sit-em players, and maybe who's your best? Let's start with this. Who's your best start and sit-em player over the weekend?
All right, so let me pull up my rankings here. So I think that, I was really high on some Broncos until, they just kept getting hurt.
Not only that, but until they lost to the 0-5 Giants in a pretty despicable performance.
Yeah, I mean, that's extremely embarrassing also.
Yeah.
I think the Broncos are better than that. I think Simeon's better than that. So I think that, I think I'm going to have Simeon a little higher than a lot of people this week, because he has shown us that he can play at a high level. That doesn't mean he has, but I think that he can rebound. So,
but are you worried at all? Are you worried at all that the injury could potentially? Well, so let me say this, because I don't foresee them throwing the ball 40 times, 50 times like they did against the Giants. I would imagine they kind of want to go the Alex Smith treatment. They want to go 25, 27 times a game. So is Trevor Siemian really a legitimate fantasy quarterback?
I think if you're in a 2-quarterback league, then, which a lot of people are now, or have an offensive player slot, I think you're definitely are at least interested in Simeon, just because the Broncos are not as bad as they played on Sunday. I don't believe that they are. I think the Giants are better than 0-5, better than 1-5, but I don't think the Broncos are as bad as they played. So I think that, look at Alex Smith, the numbers he's putting up this year. I mean, that's a very startable fantasy quarterback, so you just have to really look at the matchups with him, and he would be a streaming option for me. He's not an automatic start by any means, but I think that this week especially, I'm going to be looking at Christian McCaffrey. And
you're not getting him, by the way, still.
What was that?
I said you're not getting him, by the way. Talking about the trade earlier, you're still not getting him.
I'm not. I've tried so hard to pry him from you, but it wasn't happening. Being from Colorado, we all like Christian McCaffrey.
Right, exactly.
So, but Jonathan Stewart rushed for -4 yards last week. I mean, that's atrocious. I mean, you can't even make positive yardage. There's going to be a change. Cam Newton taking more hits. He needs the running game. Cam Newton needs Christian McCaffrey. And so I think that Ron Rivera will give him that. And I think Christian McCaffrey, you're finally going to see him get a chance. I'm not as high as him being some franchise back as far as a runner. I think he'll be average, but he's going to catch a lot of passes, a lot of checkdowns. And I think that he's going to be kind of that Tyreek Hill, Kareem Hunt mixture where he's just lining up all over the place.
It's a pretty good mixture, though.
Yeah, that is a really good mixture, and I think he has that kind of level of production. So start him for me this week is Christian McCaffrey, and sit him for Jonathan Stewart.
Okay. Yeah, and so who would be your, well, let's just go to a sit-em of the week.
My sit-em of the week. Let's think. I think there's a lot of position groups on teams that you're not going to touch. I don't want a Broncos running back. I don't want a Giants running back. Even though Darkwa had a big week, I don't. That offensive line is still patchwork. So I think my sit-em is going to be the one that everybody's high on, and that's going to be Orleans Darkwa from the Giants, because he's going to be a really big waiver wire ad. I think a lot of people saw that he rushed for over 100 yards against the Broncos. You got to remember that offensive line just played out of their minds this last week. I don't see that happening again. They still don't have any receivers. Eli Manning is just okay. I think that that's my sit-em for the week. That's going to be controversy or not like popular opinion. So,
I guess now moving forward, we mentioned it about some of the at least with Brett Hundley, that he's a long-term guy as far as maybe some quarterback for you. Who are maybe some other long-term players for you before we send you home?
I think that Jameis Winston is going to be a lot better throughout the rest of this year. He had a rough couple weeks here in his last few weeks. starting to get back on track. I think Jameis Winston's better than he's played. I think Marcus Mariota is going to be a good long-term quarterback. He kind of got off to a better start yesterday. He was, has been out with the hamstring injury. I think that he's a good play. And then Tyrod Taylor he's such a dark horse fantasy quarterback. The dude is just solid. He makes plays. And he's not spectacular, but he gets the job done, and he's going to give you between the quarterback 10 and quarterback 20 ranking every single week. So if you need a filler for bye weeks, or you have somebody that gets hurt and you need a waiver wire ad, be looking at Tyrod Taylor.
All right, because certainly for me, on a personal side of things, as far as for fantasy, I really do like those quarterbacks that are the effective when they can throw the ball, and they add the plus as far as the scramble yards and those extra rushing yards from a quarterback. Because I feel like that's kind of a dual plus when you have a guy like that, and that's why I think that some guys like maybe a Matthew Stafford doesn't get a whole lot of credit, because he's mobile enough that he can get those rushing yards, but he can also, as we've witnessed, light it up like his good friend Clayton Kershaw, and so and then even you get guys like Carson Wentz, who and I know that you're high on him as well as I am, and I think that Carson Wentz, maybe when all is said and done, at least from my vantage point, for a long term, and maybe a guy that, well, for me personally, I have him on my bench because, well, I have Cam Newton starting. But I think that it would be one of those cases to where he is not just going to take off on a football side of things, but I see Carson Wentz taking off maybe to another level, because, for one, Philly's a much better football team, and he has a whole heck of a lot of targets that he is going to get the ball to. Nelson Aguilar's having a great year. Alshon Jeffrey's having a great year. So if I was to pinpoint a guy like you were saying, Jameis Winston, to name one, I would say Carson Wentz for myself.
Yeah, I think that if you can find an owner in your league that has Carson Wentz that isn't high on him, like you are, or like I am,
or he's stashed away pretty much.
Yeah, or he's stashed away or whatever, stuck behind somebody, trade for Carson Wentz. That dude is legit. He's top 5 quarterback for me the rest of the year. I might even have him above Cam Newton, honestly. Depending on the week, I might start him. And it's, Carson Wentz is legit. If you're in a dynasty league, Wentz is maybe quarterback 3 or 4 for me. And I think that's saying a lot with quarterbacks that we have in the league.
Yeah.
Also, Zach Ertz only benefits from having Wentz every week. Zach Ertz is a stud.
He's leading in receiving yards.
What was that?
I was going to say he's leading in receiving yards, and I think he's leading in touchdowns for all tight ends, I believe, but I may be mistaken.
Oh, yeah. If you watched the game last Sunday, they were drawing up plays to get Ertz the ball in the end zone. They were clearing out the back of the end zone and letting Ertz just run across the back wide open. I mean, that play was drawn for him the whole time. So they're trying to get him the ball. They're trying to get him 6. And I think him, and this is another player that I don't think many people are giving enough credit to, is Austin Seferian-Jenkins from the Jets.
Should have had a touchdown last weekend, but,
Yeah, he is... I would add him over most receivers at this point. That dude is getting healthy target share. I think he was like 6 for 47 this week with a touchdown. The Jets don't have anybody else to throw to. And, their receivers aren't that good. And they're giving Seferian-Jenkins plenty of targets. And I think that he's worth an add and an immediate start in every league.
Not to mention, you mentioned it, they really don't have anybody. And as far as Josh McCown, you kind of go back to the diaper stage when you're a rookie. When you start getting older, you start to find your comfort level. And that comfort level for quarterbacks is usually your slot receiver, your tight end, or maybe your running back on a check down. And so I think that, for Josh McCown, I think it's understandable why he's targeting Austin Seferian-Jenkins so much.
Mm-hmm. And, McCown looked good. You got to give it to him. Last week, he looked like he knew what he was doing. I don't think he really does. I think that we all know who he is, but
right.
Seferian-Jenkins I mean, he's the go-to guy because who else do you have out there? Robbie Anderson? I mean, who?
Right.
And I think, Safarian Jenkins is an immediate start in every single league, unless you have somebody like an Ertz.
Right. Who, real quick, I guess, before we send you off, who's been some of your disappointing rookies? Because I know that, for me, we're talking tight ends. O.J. Howard has been an extreme disappointment. But they're also using Cameron Brate more. But I don't foresee that being the plan in the future, because why would you draft a guy first round,
Absolutely.
And him not being your guy long term? So who are some of your rookie disappointments as far as fantasy?
I don't think there have been a lot. I think that we have some really high expectations for rookies right off the bat nowadays,
Okay.
especially tight ends. The tight end is probably the biggest learning curve in the NFL. I think that, you see people that all the time that get drafted that don't really surface for 2-3 years as far as stat production goes. And I think that's normal. So for people like O.J. Howard, if you're in a dynasty league, yeah, keep him. Great. He's still a great stash on your bench in a dynasty league. He's not startable. But I think as Jameis Winston starts to pick it up a little bit, hopefully he realizes that he has this first-round talent, and maybe he starts to click here at the end of the year. But I think he has to be up there for fantasy disappointments just because people hyped him so much. And, people like Evan Ingram and David Njoku have not helped him in that regard because they've been so productive. But I think, I would have to say that Howard would be the biggest disappointment. I also think that this is kind of an under-the-radar one, but a lot of people were really high on Jamal Williams. From the Packers.
You and me included.
Yeah, us included. I watched him at BYU, and the dude was a stud. And the Packers needed a back. They got him, and they completely skipped right over him. I know he had a little injury bug. He came out in like 2 carries, and he might not see the field. So I think he's got to be. He's not really a big name, but he was a disappointment for me too.
Okay. Well, hey, CJ, thank you very much, man, for coming on the Cameron Parker Show, and we're going to make it a weekly thing to have you come talk some fantasy football. We're going to call it the Fantasy Football Focus segment with CJ Cranock.
All right, sounds good to me, man. I'm really excited.
Absolutely. Well, hey, man, you take care, and take care of that baby for you.
All right, I will. Thanks, Cameron.
Yeah, all right.
Bye.
Bye. Well, there you have it. That was our Fantasy Football Focus segment, or should we say the Release the Cranock segment with CJ. He's a good friend of mine. I hope you guys enjoyed that fantasy football discussion as much as I did. When we come back, we're going to talk for the next 15 minutes about the Denver Broncos some more, get back into the Denver Broncos swing of things, and then when we return, we're going to be going back into the "if it ain't broke, don't fix it" discussion, and we're going to get to some of your guys' discussion as well. This is the Cameron Parker Show.
We lift praise to you in heaven, and we raise our hands in adoration. For you are the God who saves, God who reigns, God forever, pouring grace, oh Lord. We need so much more of you. 'Cause your love is running through my veins, keeps my heart beating, keeps my heart beating. Jesus, you make me wanna sing, joy is lifting me, grace has set me free. Your love is running through my veins, keeps my heart beating, keeps my heart beating. Jesus, you make me wanna sing, joy is lifting me, grace has set me free. The chains of our feet. So we dance before our God and King. For you are the God who saves, God who reigns, God forever pouring grace. Oh Lord, we need so much more of you. 'Cause your love is running through my veins, keeps my heart beating, keeps my heart beating. Jesus, you make me wanna sing. Joy has lifted me, grace has set me free. Your love is running through my veins, keeps my heart beating, keeps my heart beating. Jesus, you make me wanna sing. Joy has lifted me, grace has set me free. Are shaking. Your love is unending. I'm on the rock, I will not be shaken. Jesus, your love unfailing. So giving praise till the walls are shaking. Your love is unending. I'm on the rock, I will not be shaken. Jesus, your love unfailing. Your love is running through my veins, keeps my heart beating, keeps my heart beating. Your love is running through my veins, keeps my heart beating, keeps my heart beating. Jesus, you make me wanna sing. Joy has lifted me, grace has set me free. Your love is running through my veins. Oh, Jesus, you make me wanna sing. Joy has lifted me, grace has set me free.
Thank you very much to CJ Cranock for coming on and doing the fantasy football focused discussion right here on the Cameron Parker Show. We were talking about the Denver Broncos before we went into the fantasy football era, or topic, I should say. If you guys want to go back and listen to the CJ Cranock interview, be sure to listen to the Cameron Parker Show podcast, and that is over on iHeartRadio and as well as iTunes. So be sure to check that out, and we will be we'll be having him on more and more as the season wears on, and certainly as the playoffs grow ever nearer. And in fact, you know what? We're going to change things up a little bit, maybe. And if you guys are very comfortable and you guys really like that fantasy football discussion, we are going to get your comments on the air, and we're going to, if you guys feel free to have some questions for CJ that you feel that you want to ask him, please feel free to do so next time he comes on, and we will get those questions for you his way. So the Denver Broncos, they didn't have the game of games, certainly against an 0-5 opponent, and it looked disappointing. And I think that, we were talking about it before CJ came on. It was incredibly disappointing to see the team break everything that they did. And, we touched a little bit on it on the discussion, the fantasy discussion with CJ. But, and in my view, I think it's going to hurt his fantasy stock. But you really don't want Trevor Siemian to be throwing the ball 40 times a game. The game plan should always be to have Trevor Siemian throw 25 to 27 times a game, for a little over 200 yards. Just do what's asked of him. And that's really what you have to have Trevor Siemian do, is you have to have him do what is asked of him. And he's really not living up to it right now as far as him regressing. The pocket presence isn't there. he's missing a lot of guys, and he's thrown a decent amount of certainly a lot of interceptions in the past handful of weeks, and he's paying the price for it. He's regressed incredibly mightily that we discussed, before CJ came on. So I think that you look at it for the other disappointment, certainly that the Broncos had was their run defense. I mean, they gave up 100 yards to Orleans Darkwa, and that was an incredible disappointment for the Broncos' sake, because you held Ezekiel Elliott to under 100 yards, you held Marshawn Lynch to 100 yards, you held LaShawn McCoy to 100 yards. You held Melvin Gordon to under 100 yards. You held all of those prominent running backs and put yourself on the map as an incredibly stout run defense, and you allow Orleans Darkwa to run all over you. That just cannot happen. It cannot happen, and I would look for the Broncos to bounce back against the Chargers on the run defensive side of things. And especially you look at that game that Melvin Gordon had against the Broncos. There were times where he would cut it outside, and he would make the Broncos pay on the outside when they would lose contain. And especially, Shaquille Barrett and Brandon Marshall have to not lose contain when it comes to their responsibility. They have to hit their gaps, and they have to be disciplined. And so I think ultimately the Broncos will be fine over the season with the run defense. It's just the offense that has to rekindle its identity. They have to rekindle the identity that was set up for them. And that identity is that they have to run the football and set up the play action. And when they do that, they are incredibly effective at throwing the ball down the field, because, as has been outlined before, the run has set up the pass exceptionally well for the Broncos, and they have to go back to that. They can't just throw 40 times and then expect to win a game. And you look at really the New England Patriots, it might be the only case where you want to throw 40 times against. Maybe the Oakland Raiders for that matter, but you still won against the Oakland Raiders 16-10 in a pretty boring game overall. So ideally, the Broncos have to do a much better job of doing what they love throughout the season. And do they decide not to do the whole, throw 40 times or whatnot? Sure, but really, the Broncos have really ensured themselves of a great identity that they have in run blocking and just a run blocking scheme. And they have done a great job in the power blocking scheme and zone blocking scheme. And really, it's meshed incredibly well so far to begin the season. It's not translating to pass blocking. And therein lies the disappointment of men like Watson. Men like Watson was injured. Emmanuel Sanders ended up getting hurt. Billy Turner had a broken hand, and he was put on IR today. It's a very disappointing loss for the Denver Broncos, and it's one that will, it's going to sting for a little bit, because everything was there for the taking. Derek Wolfe spoke out, obviously, saying that there was just no effort on either side of the ball. And that's a very disappointing thing. When you hear a player speak out and talk about no effort, that's a big deal. And I would imagine that the offense has to have a fire about them, and they have to play with a lot of energy. Manning certainly would be cool a lot of the times, but he certainly would play with a lot of energy, and it was that kicking and screaming mentality that Elway has talked about so much ever since Manning has been here, and we have yet to see it the minute that Trevor Siemian was named starter on the offensive side of the ball, there has been no mad dog, except for Garrett Bowles. There has been no, and Ron O'Leary, there has been no mad dog, except for Demaryius Thomas, Garrett Bowles, Ron O'Leary, and maybe Emmanuel Sanders for that matter. But they have to have their biggest leader and biggest swagger come from the quarterback position, in my opinion. I'm going to cut it short, ladies and gentlemen. This is the end of the Cameron Parker Show, and I will let you guys know and keep you guys updated if there will be a show on Friday or before that. But I will keep you guys posted and see if we can do another show here this week. I've got a busy schedule during this week, but I'll keep you guys posted. I'm sorry to cut you guys off here a little short. I have to, take look into some matters, obviously. But I apologize for cutting you guys short 5 minutes early. But this is the Cameron Parker Show, and thank you so much for making this show part of your guys' evening. And you guys, God bless.